On today's episode, we will be covering a story that involved 2 bulk freighter steamers and 2 schooner barges. But before we can get to the schooner barges story, we have to first talk about the steamers that would pull them behind it. We start first with the Charles J. Kershaw. Built in 1874 in Bay City, Michigan by Thomas Boston. The Charles Kershaw had a length of 223 feet. She had a width of 37 feet. Depth of 19, and she had a gross tonnage of 1,323 tons. She would primarily carry iron ore across the Great Lakes. She would also tow behind her, often enough, schooner barges, 2 of them to be exact. The other wooden-hulled Great Lakes freighter that we are talking about today is the SS Ohio. She had a lot of similar dimensions, such as the Kershaw. She came in at a length of 202 feet, with a beam of 35 feet and a depth of 18. Both of these steamers had one deck, and they had coal-fired boilers with a low-pressure steam engine to push them along. It's safe to say that the wooden-hulled Great Lakes freighter was definitely the heart and workhorse across the Great Lakes in the late to mid-1800s. And now on to the schooner barges that would more often than not be towed behind the wooden bulk freighters. The Ironton had a length of 191 feet. She had a beam of 35 feet and a gross tonnage of 785 tons. The Ironton was capable of carrying a capacity of over 48,500 bushels of grain, or 1,250 tons of coal. She had a career of over 22 years, and she had an ownership change multiple times. She would continue her service transporting iron ore, grain, and coal between ports such as Buffalo, Cleveland, Marquette, and Duluth. The same could be said for the schooner barge Moonlight as well. The Moonlight had a length of 205 feet, a beam of 33 feet, and a depth of 14. She also had a gross tonnage of 777 tons. These schooners had 3 masts. However, even though the schooner barge's primary way of propulsion was their sailing masts, they were also equipped with auxiliary steam engines that could also help push them along if need be. All of these magnificent vessels would be going about their normal service careers across Lake Huron and other Great Lakes like Superior. However, in September of 1894, all 4 of these vessels would come into contact and create a disaster. On September 26, 1894, the steamer Charles J. Kershaw had just departed from Ashtabula, Ohio on Lake Erie. Behind her were the schooner barges Ironton and Moonlight. These schooner barges were sailing empty, and they were headed for Marquette, Michigan on Lake Superior. At around 12:30 a.m., as the Charles Kershaw was making her way north across Lake Huron under clear skies, the Kershaw's engines actually failed. This left the ship without power. It was just a few miles north of the Presque Isle Lighthouse. As the 3 vessels were drifting, a strong south wind began to push the Moonlight and the Ironton toward the disabled steamer. This could cause devastating damage. A decision was made quickly to avoid entanglement. The Moonlight's crew cut the Ironton's tow line and detached from her. This sent the schooner drifting off into Lake Huron. The Ironton's crew then found themselves suddenly and abruptly adrift, alone, in the dark, and at the mercy of Lake Huron's storm that was beginning to blow the seas. Captain Peter Gerard fought to regain control of the ship. He made the order to fire up the vessel's auxiliary steam engine to help set the struggling schooner barge's sails in order. However, because of the fierceness of the storm on Lake Huron and them drifting about, their efforts were in vain. The Ironton was propelled by the wind from astern and veered off course into the path of the southbound steamer which was approaching, the SS Ohio. As stated before, the Ohio was a 203-foot-long wooden freighter, and she was loaded down tight with 1,000 tons of grain. This must have been a shocking moment to see a hulking big freighter of wood coming out of the night towards them, because by the time the Ironton's crew spotted the approaching Ohio through the darkness, it was too late, and disaster happened. The Ohio collided into the Ironton. There was absolutely no way to avoid this collision, especially as the Ironton was adrift and floating randomly in Lake Huron. A news article from the Duluth Tribune says from a survivor, as he recounted his experience, and I quote, "At this time we sighted a steamer on our starboard bow. She came up across our bow and we struck her on the quarter about aft of the boiler house. A light was lowered over our bow and we saw a hole in our port bow and our stern splintered." Duluth News Tribune, September 27th, 1894. After this terrible collision, the two vessels attempted to separate and assess the impact damage. Oddly enough, severe damage was on both of the vessels. Both the Ironton and the Ohio received fatal damage. The Ironton tore a massive 12-foot hole into the Ohio's wooden hull. Being that the Ohio was heavy laden with cargo, the Ohio sank very quickly. However, and thankfully, all 16 of her crew were actually able to escape into the lifeboats of the Ohio, and then nearby ships eventually rescued the sailors. However, the Ironton was not so lucky, and she continued to drift for some time out of sight of the responding vessels that came to the Ohio's aid. By the time Captain Gerard realized that he was not able to save his ship, and he drifted for over an hour far from the view of any other vessels, he had to make a decision. The Ironton began to slip swiftly beneath the waves. This 7-man crew schooner barge then retreated to their lifeboat. However, in all the chaos, nobody remembered to untie the painter line. This is a line that secured the lifeboat to the Ironton. Survivor William W. Perry of East China, Michigan, recounted, and I quote, "Then the Ironton sank, taking the yawl with her. As the painter was not untied, I sank underwater, and when I came up and grabbed a sailor's bag, Woolley was a short distance from me on a box. I swam to where he was." Duluth News Tribune, September 27th, 1894. These were two other sailors that had managed to get into the lifeboat as it was being pulled under with the Ironton. Woolley and Perry clung to floating wreckage as they battled the wind and waves in a terrible, frigid cold Lake Huron that night. But some light to this tale. After a few hours had passed, another passing steamer named the Charles Haybard spotted and rescued the men afloat. However, not everyone made it. Captain Gerard did not make it, along with mate Ed Bostwick and sailor John Pope, and 2 other sailors who remain unknown. The Charles J. Kershaw and the Moonlight were eventually rescued. In total, after the deadly collision, 5 crew members lost their lives. However, 2 did survive. In 2019, researchers actually discovered the wreck of the Ironton, and they reported that she was in almost pristine condition, sitting on the bottom of Lake Huron, still with the lifeboat tethered to her as well when she sank. The exact location and depth of her is unknown, although I feel it may be released hopefully soon one day. And that is the full story of the tragic collision of the SS Ohio and the Ironton. Oh wow, man, what a suspenseful story. Yeah, imagine being out on Lake Huron at midnight or 12:30 midnight time, and one of these storms or high winds whips up and starts creating these waves. And yeah, I guess that makes sense, because those schooner barges being towed behind the bulk wooden freighters, like I said earlier in the video, that sounds like that could be a disaster if one of them veers too sharply, off course behind it. It could definitely create an even bigger disaster. But man, after thinking about that as well, I mean, that if one or both, or if those schooner barges are detached from the main freighter, they're at a loss there, and can only hope and pray for at the mercy of the waves out there. I mean, yeah, they had the sailing masts, but and the engine as well for emergencies, but perhaps that steam engine, that the little one that they had, was not enough to for these barges to really fight through some rough seas. And then just imagine, drifting along at night out there in probably almost pitch black conditions, and then out of nowhere, I wonder if they actually heard. Perhaps they also heard the approaching SS Ohio. They could hear its steam engines, but not knowing which direction she would be coming from until the last few moments, and then just out of the dark like that, a big hulking massive wooden freighter just comes at you guys. Oh man, I'd be sweating severely, and I don't doubt that was probably a nasty collision. Yeah, those poor guys, and I don't blame them, being in such a mad rush to get off the barge and forgetting to untie the lifeboat and getting pulled under like that. It's a miracle that two of them were found. I am so surprised that not all of them were lost. That is a miracle that those two of the crew members were found. But yeah, what an interesting story. Let me guys know what you think in the comment section down below. If you have additional information or anything that I may have missed, or even if I have gotten some information wrong, do please let me know what you guys think down below. But I appreciate you being here with me again today on this episode. And thank you again for your support. And do keep your eyes and ears open for the next episode on Songs of the Great Lakes. But until then, God bless you all.